Bernard Malamud was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1914. He was educated at the City College of New York and Columbia University, from which he graduated with an MA in 1942. After graduation, he was a high school English teacher for most of the rest of the decade, and then was offered a job as a professor of English at Oregon State College, which he accepted. He wrote his first novel, The Natural, in 1952, later made into a film, The Natural, 1984, but it didn't attract much notice. His second novel, The Assistant, came out in 1957, and the result was much different. It sold quite well and brought him into the public eye. In 1959, he won the National Book Award for Fiction. In the 1960s, he rode the wave of interest in authors writing about Jewish traditions and the Jewish experience in the US. In 1964, he was elected to the National Institute of Arts and Sciences. His next two novels, A New Life and Idiots First, got a mixed reception, but his following novel, The Fixer, in 1967, won him the National Book Award in addition to a Pulitzer Prize. It was also made into a very successful film, The Fixer, 1968. From 1966 to 1968, he was a visiting lecturer at Harvard University. Malamud's works depict hope for human potential. The protagonists are expected to abandon their self-centered ideas and grow into beings with altruistic love. For this reason, his works often include characters with values completely opposite to those of the protagonists. It is hard to relate to the values of these characters on the basis of common sense. However, the protagonists are required to accept such values, no matter how ridiculous they may think those values are. The less acceptable the other person's values seem, naturally, the more difficult or impossible it is to accept the other person without self-sacrifice, sympathy, and love for that person. Although the elements composing this barrier of common sense vary from story to story, when we analyze the values behind the barrier based on the history of the Jewish people, Jewish culture, and Judaism, we come to comprehend how difficult it is to overcome the barrier, and only then can we understand how high the level of love and self-sacrifice that Malamud demands of his protagonists is. It is no exaggeration to say that Malamud, in his later works in particular, transcends and denies the teachings of the Jewish God and portrays the Christian God and his love. In other words, he pursued the idea of loving not only his fellow Jews but also his enemies, and at the same time assumed the attitude of believing himself to be a sinner and devoting himself to God. In the past, Malamud had a high opinion of human potential and even made his characters say that they would do something in place of God. At this point, however, the writer seemed to acknowledge the limits of human power. This transcendence of the Jewish God and doctrine and acceptance of the Christian God and doctrine in Malamud's works appear to reflect the change in his view of humanity behind them. Although Malamud depicts Jews in his works, he states that the themes he deals with are universal. Nevertheless, since the writer himself is Jewish and the protagonists of most of his works are Jews, I believe that it is essential for readers to familiarize themselves with Jewish values formed based on their unique cultural, historical, and religious backgrounds in order to understand his works at a deeper level. In the meantime, I would like to continue to focus on analyzing and understanding the vast amount of knowledge that underlies Malamud's works.